Have you noticed how nothing has felt random lately? The same numbers keep appearing. The same song somehow finds you at the exact moment your heart starts questioning everything. A stranger's words echo like they were meant only for you. You try to brush it off, telling yourself it was coincidence, but deep inside, something refuses to let you walk away. Because what you're about to hear isn't just another message. It's the one your heart has been waiting for, even if your mind isn't ready to believe it. And what happens after you hear these words may change the direction of everything you thought you knew. You didn't stumble across this by accident. Out of the millions of voices calling for your attention today, somehow your eyes landed here. Maybe you almost kept scrolling. Maybe you hesitated for just a second. That hesitation wasn't weakness. It was recognition. Somewhere beneath all the disappointment, all the unanswered prayers, and every silent tear you've hidden from the world, your soul recognized something familiar. Something it has been searching for longer than you can remember. But why now, and why does it suddenly feel so urgent? Your heart has been carrying questions you rarely speak out loud. You wonder why love always seems to arrive carrying lessons instead of peace. You wonder why certain people entered your life only to disappear before you could understand their purpose. Some nights you replay conversations that ended years ago, wondering if one different sentence could have changed everything. You pretend you've moved on, but your soul remembers every unfinished goodbye. And someone else remembers them too. Your soulmate has been fighting a battle you cannot see. While you've been questioning the silence, they have been trapped inside storms they never expected to face. Every smile they've shown the world has hidden a deeper struggle. Every "I'm okay" has covered another sleepless night. You believed distance meant indifference, but sometimes distance is created by fear, by timing, by wounds too deep to explain. And what they finally admitted changes everything. There was a moment when they almost reached out to you. Their hand hovered over the phone. Your name appeared before their eyes. They imagined what they would say after all this time. But then doubt whispered louder than hope. What if you had already forgotten them? What if your heart belonged to someone else? What if they had waited too long? Those questions became chains they couldn't break, and the silence grew heavier with every passing day. Yet something unexpected happened next. The universe has an unusual way of interrupting people who refuse to listen to their own hearts. Little signs began surrounding them. They kept seeing reminders they couldn't explain. Places connected to memories of you suddenly appeared in conversations. Dreams became more vivid. Your laughter echoed inside moments where it shouldn't have existed. Even strangers unknowingly spoke words that sounded like answers to prayers they hadn't dared to pray aloud. But there was one sign that frightened them more than all the others. They realized they were slowly losing the version of themselves that believed love was still possible. That realization shook them to their core. It wasn't losing you that terrified them most. It was becoming someone incapable of receiving the very love they had spent their whole life searching for. And in that painful moment, your name returned to their heart stronger than ever before. You may think this story is only about romance, but it reaches much deeper than that. This has never been only about finding another person. It has always been about finding the version of yourself that stopped settling for fear. Every heartbreak you've survived wasn't sent to destroy your ability to love. It was preparing you to recognize a connection that would demand honesty instead of pretending. But are you truly ready to recognize it when it finally stands before you? There were times when you blamed yourself for everything that went wrong. You replayed mistakes until they became part of your identity. You carried guilt that wasn't entirely yours. You apologized for things that were never your responsibility. Slowly, without realizing it, you convinced yourself that maybe lasting love belonged to everyone except you. But what if the greatest lie you've ever believed is about to be exposed? Your soulmate has finally spoken the words they buried for far too long. They admitted they ran because they were afraid of losing someone who actually mattered. They admitted they confused healing with hiding. They admitted they mistook silence for protection, when all it really created was loneliness. Those confessions didn't erase the past, but they shattered the walls they spent years building around their heart. And now those walls are falling faster than either of you expected. Something inside you has already begun changing, even if you haven't noticed it yet. The things that once distracted you no longer satisfy you. The conversations that used to excite you now feel empty. You're becoming more aware of your own worth, more protective of your peace, and strangely less interested in chasing people who refuse to choose you. That transformation isn't accidental. It's preparing you for something your old self could never have handled. But the timing still holds one final mystery. Every delay you've cursed has secretly been shaping both of your lives. Had you met again too soon, old wounds would have spoken louder than love. Pride would have answered instead of honesty. Fear would have disguised itself as wisdom. You both needed to lose certain illusions before finding each other again. The waiting wasn't punishment. It was preparation. And preparation always reaches its end. Imagine standing at the edge of a sunrise after believing the night would never finish. That's where your spirit is now. You may still see darkness around you, but light has already begun moving toward you. The first rays always appear before anyone notices them. Hope rarely arrives with loud announcements. It enters quietly, changing everything while pretending nothing has happened. Yet one unexpected encounter is about to prove that nothing has remained the same. Your soulmate has cried over conversations that never happened. They have imagined asking for forgiveness 1,000 different ways. Sometimes they rehearsed entire speeches while driving alone. Other times they whispered your name into empty rooms, wondering if somehow your heart could hear them. They weren't asking for perfection anymore. They were asking for one more chance to tell the truth. But there is something they still haven't confessed. the truth is that your connection has always existed beyond ordinary understanding. Long before your paths crossed, your souls were learning the same lessons in different places. Both of you experienced abandonment. Both of you learned how easily trust could be broken. Both of you built invisible armor to survive. You thought those similarities were coincidence, but they were the language your spirits already understood. And that language is awakening again, even now. While you read these words, you may feel emotions rising that don't completely make sense. Maybe your chest feels heavier. Maybe a forgotten memory suddenly returns without warning. Maybe someone unexpectedly entered your thoughts before you even realized it. Don't ignore those moments. Sometimes your soul recognizes truth before your mind can explain it. And this recognition is leading somewhere neither of you expected. There is one decision approaching that cannot be postponed forever. It isn't only your soulmate who must choose courage. You will also face a moment where protecting your heart and opening your heart will no longer be the same thing. You'll have to decide whether fear deserves another victory or whether hope finally deserves its chance. That decision will arrive sooner than you think. The universe rarely shouts. It whispers first. It places gentle opportunities before dramatic miracles. It offers small acts of courage before life-changing transformations. That's why this message feels so personal. It isn't trying to force your future. It's asking whether you'll pay attention when destiny quietly knocks instead of breaking the door down. Because destiny has already begun moving. Somewhere, your soulmate is carrying the same invisible ache you've been trying to hide. They wonder if you're happy. They wonder if you've forgiven them. They wonder if fate still allows impossible stories to become real. They don't know that your own heart has been asking nearly identical questions. Two people separated by silence are still connected by hope. And hope has become impossible to ignore. The next chapter of your life won't look like the last one. The version of you who accepted breadcrumbs is disappearing. The version of you who confused loneliness with peace is fading away. Something stronger is emerging. Something wiser. Something capable of recognizing love that arrives with honesty instead of confusion. But every transformation asks for one final test before revealing its greatest reward. That test won't come dressed as certainty. It will arrive disguised as another ordinary day. You'll wake up expecting nothing unusual. You'll follow routines you've followed countless times before. Then one unexpected moment will interrupt everything. A message. A familiar face. A name you haven't heard in far too long. One tiny event will begin unraveling years of silence. And when it happens, you'll finally understand why every delay, every heartbreak, every unanswered prayer brought you to this exact moment, because your soulmate has one last confession waiting to be heard, a confession they believe could either heal both of your hearts forever, or become the final goodbye neither of you will ever recover from. For so long, they believed silence was the safest place to hide. Silence could not reject them. Silence could not expose every mistake they still carried. Silence asked for nothing, and because it asked for nothing, it slowly took everything. Every day they convinced themselves there would always be another tomorrow, another opportunity, another perfect moment to reach out. But then life reminded them of something few people ever want to admit. Tomorrow is a promise no one has the power to make. And the realization came far too suddenly. There was one ordinary evening that changed everything. Nothing dramatic happened on the outside. The streets looked the same. The sky carried the same fading light. People laughed, drove home, and hurried through their routines without noticing that one soul had quietly reached a breaking point. In the middle of that ordinary moment, your soulmate finally stopped running from the truth they had buried beneath years of excuses. The truth hit harder than they ever imagined, and it carried only one name, yours, not because you were perfect. Not because your story together had been free from pain. Not because every memory was beautiful. It was because you were the only person who ever made them feel seen without demanding they become someone else. You saw pieces of them they spent years trying to hide. Somehow, you loved the parts they believed made them impossible to love. They never forgot that. They only convinced themselves they didn't deserve it. But destiny has a strange way of exposing every lie fear teaches you to believe. They began replaying every memory differently. The goodbye they once blamed on bad timing suddenly looked like fear. The argument they believed ended everything suddenly looked like two wounded hearts speaking through pain instead of love. The distance they accepted as permanent suddenly looked like a test neither of you understood at the time. One by one, every memory transformed until the story they had believed for years no longer made sense. If the past wasn't what they thought it was, then what was the future trying to become? At the same time, something was changing inside you. You couldn't explain why old chapters no longer tempted you. The people who once occupied your thoughts every hour slowly faded into silence. The need to chase disappeared. The need to prove your worth disappeared. Even the loneliness began changing shape. It no longer felt like punishment. It started feeling like preparation. Almost as if your soul knew it needed room for someone who had not yet arrived. But why did your heart begin preparing before your mind understood what was coming? Some nights, without warning, you felt someone deeply, not physically, not logically, spiritually. A sudden wave of emotion appeared out of nowhere. You stopped what you were doing. You looked toward a window. You stared at the sky. You wondered why your heart suddenly felt full and empty at exactly the same time. Those moments were never as meaningless as they seemed, because while you were feeling something you couldn't explain, someone else was whispering your name into the quiet, hoping somehow the universe could carry what their voice could not. They started writing letters they never intended anyone to read, page after page filled with words they should have spoken years ago. I was afraid. I thought leaving would protect us. I didn't know how broken I really was. I never stopped wondering about you. Each sentence became heavier than the last. Sometimes they folded the pages and hid them. Sometimes they tore them apart. Sometimes they cried before finishing the first paragraph, yet every unfinished letter carried the same ending: I wish you knew, but there is one sentence they still haven't found the courage to write. Meanwhile, life kept placing strange signs before you. A familiar fragrance drifted through the air for no reason. An old photograph appeared while cleaning. A place you hadn't visited in years suddenly entered your thoughts. A conversation between strangers sounded as though it was answering a question you never asked aloud. Coincidence became harder to believe. The invisible threads connecting your story refused to disappear, and every sign pointed toward a meeting that seemed impossible. Your soulmate finally admitted something that frightened them more than losing you. They admitted they had been running from themselves. For years they blamed circumstances, timing, distance, other people, bad luck. But deep inside they knew the hardest truth. The greatest obstacle standing between the two of you had always been the fear living inside their own heart. The moment they accepted responsibility, something extraordinary began happening. The chains started breaking, not all at once, not dramatically, quietly, one honest decision at a time. One forgiven memory at a time, one hopeful breath at a time. Transformation rarely arrives with fireworks. It arrives through courage repeated when no one is watching, and someone has finally chosen courage. You may still question whether this connection is real. You may wonder if your heart is simply trying to protect itself from disappointment again. That's understandable. After everything you've survived, caution feels wiser than hope, but there is a difference between protecting your heart and imprisoning it. One keeps you safe, the other keeps you alone. Soon, life will ask which one you've been choosing. There is a conversation waiting in your future, not the conversation you rehearsed. Not the one built on blame, not the one filled with explanations. A different conversation, one where silence finally loses, one where masks fall away, one where two people stop pretending they were never affected by each other. Words that have remained trapped for years are preparing to breathe for the very first time, and one single sentence will change everything you thought was over. I never stopped loving you. Those words have lived inside your soulmate longer than anyone knows, longer than their pride, longer than their fear, longer than every excuse that kept them away. They carried those words through birthdays you never celebrated together, through holidays spent wondering what your life looked like now, through nights when they smiled for everyone else but secretly wished they could erase every mile between you. Love survived, even when hope almost didn't. But love alone isn't the final chapter, because every miracle arrives with a choice. The universe can open a door. It cannot force someone to walk through it. Destiny can bring two paths together. It cannot make two hearts choose courage. That decision still belongs to both of you. And someone is standing at that doorway right now. As you read these final words, time continues moving. Somewhere, perhaps much closer than you realize, your soulmate is reaching the point where silence is no longer possible. Their hand trembles. Their heart races. They know one message could rebuild what fear nearly destroyed, or they could remain quiet forever and spend the rest of their life wondering what might have happened if they had simply been brave enough. And at this very moment, their finger is hovering over one button. A message with your name is already written. All that remains is whether they finally find the courage to press send. for a long moment, nothing happens. The message remains. On the screen, your name glows softly beneath the words they have rewritten more times than they can count. Every sentence carries years of regret. Every pause between the lines holds memories they never stopped replaying. Their thumb hovers above the screen, frozen between fear and faith. It should be a simple decision, yet it feels as though their entire future depends on one small movement. And perhaps it does. They close their eyes, not to escape, to remember. They remember the first time your laughter made an ordinary day unforgettable. They remember conversations that lasted until neither of you noticed the clock anymore. They remember promises that were never spoken out loud but somehow existed anyway. Even the painful moments return, not as reminders of failure, but as proof that what you shared was real enough to leave permanent marks on both of your hearts. Those marks never disappeared. They simply learned how to hide beneath the surface. You have your own hidden memories. You rarely admit how often they still appear: a familiar street, a favorite song, a certain time of evening when the world becomes quiet enough for old emotions to return. You tell yourself those memories belong to another chapter, yet every time they arrive, they carry the same question: what if the story was never finished? That question has followed you longer than you realize, and today, for reasons you cannot explain, it suddenly feels closer to an answer. Across the distance, your soulmate finally whispers something they have never had the courage to say aloud: if I lose you forever, it won't be because I stopped loving you. Their voice trembles. It will be because I waited too long. Those words echo through the silence until even they cannot ignore them anymore. For the first time in years, they stop asking whether reaching out will hurt. Instead, they begin asking a different question: what if this is my last chance? Everything changes when that question enters the heart. Life has a mysterious way of placing people at crossroads without warning. One moment feels ordinary, the next becomes unforgettable. The phone rings, a notification appears. A familiar face walks into an unexpected place. A single decision creates two completely different futures. Most people never recognize those moments until years later, but this time, something deep inside you is already awake.